I got involved a little bit in working with Iraqi vets. A couple of years ago, I was leading a retreat deep in the redwoods in Mendocino Woodlands Camp for men. And I've been part of these retreats for more than 20 years. And now we have deliberately tried to include young men who are getting out of the gang life in the inner cities. So we have guys coming up from L.A. and Chicago and Oakland with their mentors who've been in gangs but are trying to get out. And also it happened that we had some vets coming back from Fallujah and Ramadi. And during these retreats, we're way deep in the redwood forest in this camp, far away from anything. In an old lodge with a stone fireplace that's been there for, 70 years. And mostly it's lit at night by candles, and we do storytelling and mythology and poetry and drumming and rituals and meditation, all kinds of things. And in the evenings, after our working together and singing these beautiful African songs that Malidoma teaches us, in the evening men stand up and just talk about what it is like to be a man. And mostly it's just stories of struggle and difficulty, because that's how it is to be a man, generally, as opposed to being a woman, which is equally stories of struggle and difficulty and joy. But, nobody knows quite how to be a man. You don't get a manual when you come in, and the culture's not terribly good at teaching that stuff. But anyway, one night, after a couple of days, we were there doing our drumming and storytelling and so forth, and talking about real struggles, what it's like when you get into the worst places, how do you get through it. This young guy stood up, and he was the youngest guy there. He maybe 16 years old. And he started to tell a story. He said, I think he was in Jordan Downs, which is one of the projects in Watts in L.A. And he started to talk about the gang wars between the Crips and the Bloods. And he said, so I'm out with my guys, and we're near the edge of our territory, and all of a sudden we see coming from the other territory this car with tinted windows moving real slow. And we go, uh-oh, this doesn't look good. And so we start to run because we're afraid it's going to be a drive-by. And these young men who are there, they know a lot of dead people. We'll put on the altar, we'll say, go and bring stones of people that you know your age who've died. And sometimes some of these guys will come back from the stream with their hands full of stones. And it's amazing to see. And they'll weep as they place them on the altar. And he said, so we start to run, and the window comes down, and they start shooting. And the youngest kid in our gang gets shot. And he's a real close buddy of mine, and I don't know whether to run or not to run, and I start running away because I don't want to get shot, but I feel bad. I'm leaving him, and then the car goes away, and I run back and I hold him, and he dies. And this kid is 16 years old, and he's weeping. And he said, and then the police came, and they wouldn't let me stay with him. They said, no, this was a murder scene, you can't stay. And he said, wait a second, this is my friend. And he tried to stay with him. And so he's standing there telling this whole story, and everybody in the room is feeling his agony. And 2 or 3 guys over from him stands one of the Marines, a couple of them who'd just come back from the Middle East. And the gang kids really admire the Marines. There's these great big buff guys with tattoos they've been in the real battle, not just the undeclared war on the streets, but they were over there in the bigger weapons, and so they sort of admire him. And this Marine walks over and puts his hand around the shoulders of this young boy and says, you did the right thing. He said, when the firefight starts, you got to get down, you got to get out of the line of fire, but then you never leave your man. And so you did the right thing. And he's holding him, and we're all going, ah. And then he looks up and he says, yeah, this is how it is. He said, I can't tell you what I saw. And then he says, and I can't tell you what I did. And that's really the agony. I can't tell you what I did. He says, like one afternoon, I'm there and it's getting to be dusk, and, I'm manning a checkpoint, and there's been all these suicide bombs, and these people are starting to come up the checkpoint, and I say, stop. These Iraqis, and I can't tell who's who. Stop, we got to search, we got to see who's, and stop. And this one guy doesn't stop, this older guy, and he keeps walking. I say, stop, you can't. And finally, he keeps coming, and I shoot him up. And then they start shrieking and wailing, and somebody translates, says, don't you know the old man was deaf? And so he's standing there weeping now, holding this young man. And those of us who are leading the retreat are just, at least me, I'm just kind of breathing and trying to be present for the suffering. And then Michael Meade, my colleague, stands up, the mythologist, and he says, let me tell you a story. He said, in old Ireland, the most famous of the Irish warriors was a man named Cuchulainn. Is that how you say it? Those who know? And he was, he was renowned as this fierce warrior. And one of the stories is that he went to battle because their little kingdom where he lived was being attacked by some marauding army. And the Irish were insane warriors. They went into battle naked with paint on them and their eyes ablaze and just, they looked so crazed that mostly other armies ran away. But anyway, he went out and he was this great warrior and he took his chariot and he almost single-handedly defeated all these people and he saved the day, but he became so possessed by the power of battle, covered with blood, possessed by Mars, by Ares, by the intensity of battle, that he turned his chariot around and was headed back down to his own town or village as if still caught up he would kill other people. And we have 1.3 million people coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, mostly with great trauma. So there he was, and they didn't know what to do. And then somebody called the old wise woman from the village out. What should we do? What should we do? And she said, there are three things, quickly. So the first is they called out all the women from the village who stood in a line and bared their breasts. This slowed him down a little bit. Right? Enough so that they could put a rope around him and put him in a cauldron of cold water which hissed off his body. They had to fill it 3 times. And you listen to these stories and they're really archetypal. I mean, it's talking about the feminine, about him remembering the taste of his mother's milk, in some way. And then the third thing they did after filling it 3 times is they took him, and still bound, and they laid him on the carpet at the feet of the local king and queen. And for 3 days and nights they sang the songs of great warriors who had come back and released battle and returned to their life in the village and the town and sort of had made their way back to be part of the human society. And after 3 days and nights they untied him. And after Michael had told this story, 100 men stood up in the dark with these candles and sang for half an hour this beautiful kind of haunting African song that we repeated over and over. And it's as if we were singing these guys back into their bodies. And then we talked about it. What kind of greeting is going to happen to the people who come back from Afghanistan and Iraq and are left out by the bus on a corner? To go back. How do we bring our warriors and contractors and all? How do we bring these people back? So what's critical for us at this time, whether it's the financial things that we're going through or the fact that we still have 2 unended wars or other things in our own personal life, is the quality of compassion that we bring to one another. Nothing else will heal ourselves. Nothing else will heal the world. And this is as natural as the air we breathe. Abraham Maslow, the great psychologist, talked about the psychology, the triangle, the pyramid of needs. The bottom was food and water, and then there was above it shelter, and then social needs and creative needs, and finally spiritual needs. If you had, food and shelter, then you had a spiritual need. But at the end of his life, he figured out that he had it wrong, that it wasn't just a pyramid, that in fact, even if the needs are not met, even if you're hungry, there's still an ache also for meaning. There's still an ache for connection. There's still an ache to be human in a compassionate way. It is simply woven into us.